As we hurtle towards another election season, the political landscape resembles a reality TV show more than ever. And like any good reality show, we might be in for a dramatic return of a familiar face: Donald J. Trump. But the question on everyone's minds is America, and indeed the world, ready for Trump? The greatest comeback in history of the business, or... First up, the ongoing saga of Russia and Ukraine. Trump's approach to this conflict has raised eyebrows higher than his infamous hairdo. His bold, or as some might say, reckless statement about letting Russia do whatever they want with NATO sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles. It's like telling the school bully, "Hey, feel free to raid the lunch money of anyone not sitting at my table." This stance has NATO allies clutching their pearls and defense budgets alike. But let's dive deeper into the implications of such a stance. The Russia-Ukraine conflict isn't just about two countries duking it out on the world stage. It's a complex web of historical tensions, geopolitical ambitions, and a test of the post-Cold War international order. Trump's cavalier attitude towards NATO, an alliance that has been the bedrock of European security for over 7 decades, could potentially upend decades of diplomatic work and mutual defense agreements. Critics argue that this approach could embolden Russia, not just in Ukraine, but across Eastern Europe. It's like giving a green light to a game of geopolitical Monopoly, where Putin gets to be the car and the rest of us are left with the thimble. On the flip side, Trump supporters might argue that this is exactly the kind of shakeup NATO needs. After all, why should the US foot the bill for Europe's security? It's a valid question, but one that opens up a Pandora's box of strategic concerns. Let's not forget, Trump has always fancied himself as the ultimate dealmaker. Perhaps he believes that by giving Putin a verbal blank check, he's setting the stage for the greatest negotiation in history. Or maybe he's just hoping to score a good deal on a new Trump Tower Moscow. Either way, it's a high-stakes game of geopolitical chicken that has world leaders reaching for the mail-ox. But what would a Trump comeback mean for Ukraine specifically? His declaration that he won't give a penny more to Ukraine has sent shivers down the spines of Kiev's leadership. It's like telling someone in the middle of a boxing match, "Sorry, we're cutting off your water supply and taking away your gloves. Good luck." This stance could dramatically alter the course of the conflict, potentially leaving Ukraine in a precarious position. However, it's worth noting that Trump supporters argue that this tough love approach might be exactly what's needed to bring the conflict to a speedier resolution. They contend that continued funding only prolongs the war, and that forcing Ukraine to negotiate might lead to a quicker, if not entirely satisfactory, end to hostilities. It's a perspective that, while controversial, resonates with a significant portion of the American electorate tired of seemingly endless foreign entanglements. Moving on to the Middle East. Trump's approach to the Israel-Gaza conflict is about as subtle as a bull in a china shop. His message to Israel to get the job done is reminiscent of a frustrated football coach in the last quarter of a championship game. It's an approach that has human rights organizations and diplomats alike reaching for the panic button. The Israel-Gaza conflict is a deeply complex and sensitive issue, with historical, religious, and geopolitical dimensions that defy simple solutions. Trump's seemingly simplistic approach to this intricate problem raises serious concerns about the potential for escalation and the humanitarian consequences of such a stance. It's crucial to consider the impact on Palestinian civilians who have borne the brunt of the conflict. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza, with its dire conditions and limited access to basic necessities, is a testament to the urgent need for a nuanced and compassionate approach to the situation. Trump's rhetoric, which seems to prioritize swift action over careful consideration of human rights and international law, could potentially exacerbate an already dire situation. Moreover, Trump's stance on the conflict could have far-reaching implications for America's standing in the region. The US has long positioned itself as a mediator in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, albeit with varying degrees of success. A shift towards a more overtly pro-Israel stance could diminish America's ability to act as an honest broker in future peace negotiations. But Trump supporters argue that this no-nonsense, results-driven approach is exactly what the region needs. After all, who needs nuanced diplomacy when you can just tell everyone to figure it out or you're fired? It's foreign policy meets The Apprentice, and the ratings, stakes, have never been higher. The reality, of course, is far more complex. Any resolution to the Israel-Gaza conflict will require careful diplomacy, respect for international law, and a genuine commitment to addressing the root causes of the conflict. It will necessitate acknowledging the legitimate concerns and aspirations of both Israelis and Palestinians, and working towards a solution that ensures security, dignity, and self-determination for all parties involved. Then there's Iran. Trump's maximum pressure campaign during his first term was about as popular in Tehran as a bacon sandwich at a vegan potluck. His potential return has Iranian leaders probably wondering if they should start preparing for Maximum Pressure 2.0. This time, it's personal. The Iran issue is a perfect example of how Trump's approach to foreign policy differs from traditional diplomatic norms. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, commonly known as the Iran nuclear deal, was a multilateral agreement years in the making. Trump's unilateral withdrawal from the deal in 2018 sent shockwaves through the international community and raised questions about America's reliability as a negotiating partner. A potential Trump comeback could see a return to this hardline stance on Iran. But what would this mean in practice? The Maximum Pressure campaign, characterized by severe economic sanctions, aimed to force Iran back to the negotiating table on terms more favorable to the US. Critics argue that this approach only served to harden Iran's resolve and accelerate its nuclear program. Moreover, increased tensions with Iran have broader implications for regional stability. The Middle East is a complex chessboard of competing interests and alliances. A more aggressive stance towards Iran could potentially push it closer to the US adversaries like Russia and China, altering the balance of power in the region. On the flip side, Trump supporters argue that his tough approach is the only way to deal with what they see as an intransigent regime. They contend that the JCPOA was a flawed deal that didn't do enough to curb Iran's nuclear ambitions or address its ballistic missile program and regional activities. The Iran issue also ties into broader questions about nuclear proliferation and global security. How the US handles Iran could send signals to other nations with nuclear ambitions. It's like trying to stop a game of nuclear dominoes. One wrong move, and we might all end up glowing in the dark. Perhaps the most contentious issue is Trump's stance on foreign aid, particularly his declaration that he won't give a penny more to Ukraine. It's a statement that has fiscal conservatives cheering and foreign policy experts reaching for the smelling salts. Trump argues that it's time for America to stop being the world's piggy bank, a sentiment that resonates with many voters tired of seeing their tax dollars sent overseas. This brings us to the elephant in the room, or should I say, the elephant in the nation's living room: American taxpayers' money. Trump's America First policy resonates with those who believe charity should begin at home. His supporters argue that the billions sent to Ukraine and Israel could be better spent on domestic issues like infrastructure, healthcare, or building a certain wall that Mexico was supposedly going to pay for. But let's unpack this idea a bit more. The concept of foreign aid isn't just about charity. It's a crucial tool of foreign policy and national security. By providing aid, the US can influence events abroad, maintain strategic partnerships, and promote stability in regions crucial to American interests. It's like paying for a really expensive global insurance policy. Sure, it's costly, but it might just prevent some catastrophic claims down the line. Critics warn that the isolationist approach could lead to a power vacuum on the global stage, one that America's rivals would be all too happy to fill. It's like deciding not to pay your homeowners association fees. Sure, you save some money, but suddenly the neighborhood starts looking a lot different, and not in a good way. Moreover, in an increasingly interconnected world, isolationism might be more aspiration than reality. Global issues like climate change, pandemics, and terrorism don't respect national borders. A Trump comeback might see America trying to build walls, literal and metaphorical, in a world where problems increasingly require bridges. But let's not forget, Trump has always positioned himself as the ultimate outsider, the one who will shake up the establishment. His supporters argue that traditional diplomacy has failed, and it's time for a more direct, transactional approach to foreign policy. In their view, Trump is the political equivalent of a bull in a china shop. Sure, he might break a few things, but sometimes you need to break a few diplomatic eggs to make a foreign policy omelet. As we consider the possibility of Trump's return, it's worth noting that the world has changed since his last term. The COVID-19 pandemic has reshaped global dynamics, supply chains have been disrupted, and climate change has become an even more pressing issue. Trump's skepticism of climate science and international cooperation on this front could set the stage for some interesting G7 meetings. Picture world leaders discussing carbon emissions, while Trump suggests nuking hurricanes. It's the kind of scene that would make for great TV, if it weren't, reality. The second Trump term would likely see a significant shift in America's stance on international organizations. His skepticism of entities like the UN, WHO, and NATO is well documented. Trump's America First philosophy often translates to a distrust of multilateral institutions and agreements. It's like showing up to a potluck and insisting on eating only the dish you brought. It might satisfy you, but it doesn't make for a very convivial dinner party. This approach raises important questions about America's role in the world. Since World War II, the US has been the primary architect and guarantor of the liberal international order. A Trump comeback could see a continued retreat from this role, potentially reshaping global power dynamics in ways that are too hard to predict. Perhaps the most significant impact of a potential Trump comeback would be on America's global image and soft power. The US has long positioned itself as a beacon of democracy and stability. Trump's unconventional approach to governance and communication, hello late-night tweet storms, could once again have world leaders and citizens alike wondering if America's political institutions are as rock-solid as they once thought. Soft power, the ability to influence through attraction rather than coercion, has been a crucial component of American foreign policy. It's the reason why people around the world wear blue jeans, listen to American music, and dream of studying at US universities. A Trump comeback could see this soft power erode further, as his brash style and America First rhetoric might alienate allies and provide fodder for adversaries. On the other hand, Trump supporters argue that soft power is overrated in a world of hard realities. They contend that his tough, transactional approach is more effective in advancing American interests. It's like choosing between being liked and being respected, and in their view, respect, or perhaps fear, is the better option. We can't discuss a potential Trump comeback without addressing the elephant and donkey in the room: the deep political divisions within the United States. Trump's first term was marked by intense polarization, and a second term would likely see these divisions deepen further. This internal strife has implications beyond America's borders. The US has long prided itself on the stability and continuity of its democratic institutions. A deeply divided America, potentially facing questions about the integrity of its electoral process, could see its global influence wane. Moreover, these domestic divisions could impact foreign policy decisions. A president constantly battling for opposition at home might be tempted to seek wins abroad, potentially leading to risky foreign policy moves. It's like trying to referee a game while the stands are rioting. Not exactly conducive to clear-headed decision-making. A Trump comeback would likely see a return to his distinctive economic policies, particularly on trade. His first term was marked by trade wars, tariffs, and a general skepticism of free trade agreements. It was like watching a high-stakes poker game where everyone's bluffing, and no one's quite sure of the rules. Supporters argue that these tough tactics are necessary to level the playing field and bring manufacturing jobs back to America. Critics contend that they lead to higher prices for consumers and retaliation from trading partners. A second Trump term could see these economic battles reignited, with potentially far-reaching consequences for the global economy. Perhaps the defining feature of Trump's approach to foreign policy is its unpredictability. In a world accustomed to careful diplomatic language and long-standing norms, Trump's willingness to upend conventions can be both refreshing and terrifying, depending on your perspective. This unpredictability could be a double-edged sword in a second Trump term. On one hand, it keeps adversaries off balance and can lead to breakthroughs in seemingly intractable situations. On the other hand, it can erode trust with allies and make long-term strategic planning challenging. It's like trying to play chess when your opponent might suddenly decide to flip the board. Exciting, perhaps, but not conducive to careful strategy. As we wrap up this exploration of a potential Trump comeback, it's clear that the mere possibility of his return is enough to spark intense debate and speculation. Whether you view him as a political savior or a diplomatic wrecking ball, one thing is certain: a second Trump term would be anything but boring. The American electorate faces a crucial decision. Are they prepared for a more unconventional diplomacy, bold, some would say reckless, statements, and a reshaping of America's role on the world stage? Or will they decide that the one term of the Trump show was enough? This decision will have ramifications far beyond America's borders. From the halls of NATO to the streets of Gaza, from the negotiating tables with Iran to the climate change conferences of the future, the impact of America's choice will be felt around the globe. In the end, the decision rests with the American people. As they head to the polls, they'll be choosing not just a president, but a vision for America's place in the world. Will it be a continuation of the post-World War II order, with America as the primary guarantor of global stability? Or will it be a new paradigm, with America focusing inward and leaving the rest of the world to sort out its own problems? Whatever the outcome, one thing is clear. In the grand reality show of American politics, the season finale is shaping up to be a real cliffhanger. So buckle up, America. This ride might get bumpy. But hey, at least it'll be entertaining, right? As we sign off, remember, in the unpredictable world of politics, the only thing we can be certain of is uncertainty itself. And maybe, just maybe, a few more coffee moments along the way. Until next time, keep your eyes on the headlines and your sense of humor intact. You're going to need both.